So after 6 rounds of racing, we're finally beginning the trek towards the East Coast. I think there's a few important things to talk about here. One is that these guys are basically, a lot of the guys, Villopoto, Reed when he's healthy. These guys have been in California quite a bit, and once they make that move back east, their schedule changes a little bit. Right now, there's a lot of testing that goes on. There's a lot of sponsor obligations. There's a lot of things that, honestly, they probably don't want to do. The testing is a big burden for them. Obviously, it makes the bike better, but especially for the trainers, it really puts a cramp on what they can get accomplished during the week. I know I've heard this many times from guys is, once they get back east, they feel like they can kind of live life again. Obviously, there's a lot of riding and training, but there's not all these things afterwards that they have to do, or they have, every Thursday night they have a signing they have to do because they're in SoCal that weekend. So I know they're probably looking forward to it. It's a nice change, and we'll see how that kind of correlates into the results. Guys get a little bit more relaxed, and I think they fall into their program a little bit more. Another important factor here is the dirt change. I know that it's not as crucial as it used to be. The Dirtworks guys have gotten much better at getting the soil more firm, and the ruts have kind of gone away from maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It still is a little bit different though. Regardless of how much lime or whatever the substance is they use to harden it up, it still is East Coast. And the thing I'm looking at this year is how frozen the East Coast and the Midwest are compared to previous years. We've had that whole polar vortex deal. So I think that the dirt's going to be much softer than we've seen previously. It's yet to be determined, but that could play a factor into the results. I know Villopoto's mentioned many times throughout this season so far that he hasn't felt really comfortable with how slippery it is. So we'll see if that softer dirt plays more into his hands. I know you guys at home always hear Ralph Shaheen talking about Ryan Villopoto steering with the rear. And what he's kind of alluding to is Ryan runs a really stiff front end setup, and he likes to get his bike turned in every turn with the throttle. A lot of the bikes nowadays are front end heavy. The geometry of the frames, the manufacturers have moved the weight forward so that it allows for people to turn with their front wheel. Villopoto really doesn't like to do that as much as the other guys. He feels more comfortable getting into the turn, getting on the gas early, and getting that rear end turned around, which is basically getting his center of gravity turned with the rear end versus the front end. So that's kind of what Ralph is talking about all the time. It'll be interesting to see though, as we go east, if that plays into his favor. With more traction, he's going to have more feel and be able to get that rear end turned around with a little bit more confidence than he is right now. I think especially at Anaheim 3, where Chad won, Ryan made a very strong point to say that he didn't feel comfortable as the track broke down. It got more and more slippery during the main event, and he didn't feel as comfortable. I think that's a direct result of him trying to steer with the rear end and not having that solid feel because there was no traction. So I know we've seen, as of last year, Ryan Villopoto kind of took off once we went back east. He won 8 out of 10 races at one point. Will that happen again in 2014? That's a really good question, and I would have to say that the dirt, based on his setup and based on the comments he's made, will have basically give him an advantage at this point. All these variables that are changing as we move east, it's going to be interesting to see the travel. Another thing with Roczen, he hasn't ever done a 17-round series, so we're going to ramp up that travel for him. It's obviously going to put more wear and tear on his body than he's gone through before. I know his first year in the outdoors here, he complained about that quite a bit, was just the travel is something he wasn't that familiar with, and it really wore him down more than he was expecting. So all these factors are changing. It's going to add a little bit more spice to the series, and hopefully we'll see some changes, and it's going to make for better racing.